A starving mother sends a desperate plea for baby formula. But the letter ends up in the hands of the most feared alpha lord in the realm. By sunrise, his carriage arrives at her door. Not to punish her, but to claim her child for reasons she cannot fathom. As Beyoncé climbed into the carriage, holding Nara close, she did not yet know the truth. She did not know what kind of world she was stepping into, nor why the most powerful alpha in the Five Kingdoms would answer a beggar's plea. To understand that, one must know the kingdoms, the wolves, and the ancient bloodlines that shaped their destinies. Before we dive into the story, please subscribe and tell us the country you're watching from. I believe this video will make you believe that what's written is written. Beyoncé of Hollowcreek had endured many humiliations in her 20 years of life, but none stung as deeply as listening to her baby cry from hunger. Nara's thin wails rattled against the cracked wooden walls of the cottage, sharp and fragile like the child herself. The cold wind slipped through gaps in the roof, stirring strands of straw, and Beyoncé pressed her daughter closer, whispering apologies she no longer believed. They had nothing left. No milk, no savings, no options except one. She reached for the scrap of parchment, the last clean sheet she owned. Her hands trembled as she wrote, tears pooling so fast they blurred the ink. "Please, we need help. Anything you can spare. My baby hasn't eaten in 2 days." The letter was meant for her estranged cousin, a merchant who still owed her mother debts. Beyoncé didn't expect generosity, but she hoped for mercy. But desperation made her clumsy. Her tears fell, smudging the address. Her shaking fingers miswrote the initials. Instead of her cousin's modest stall number, the parchment bore, "To Lord Draven, High Alpha of the Western Dominion, Estate of Blackmoor Keep." The richest, most feared alpha in the Five Kingdoms. Anyone else would have burned the message, cursed her foolishness, or rewritten it. But Beyoncé was exhausted beyond reason. She sealed it, walked barefoot to the courier stand, dropped the letter into the wooden slot, and realized too late what she had done. All night she sat awake, Nara curled against her chest, visions of punishment spiraling through her mind. Fines she could never pay, imprisonment for insulting a noble, or worse, having her child taken away. Dawn came with pale silver light, and the thunder of wheels. Beyoncé froze. Outside her cottage stood a towering black carriage trimmed with obsidian metal, bearing the unmistakable crest of the Draven Wolves. A uniformed messenger dismounted and bowed stiffly. "Lady Beyoncé of Hollowcreek," he announced, offering a sealed letter. "Lord Draven acknowledges your request. Prepare yourself and the child. You're to come to Blackmoor Keep at once." Her breath shattered. This was not punishment, not yet. This was something else. Something deeper. Something dangerous. And as she clutched her infant protectively, she felt it. The first shift in the air. A crack in fate she did not understand. But soon she would. The carriage lurched forward, its heavy wheels grinding against the dirt road as Beyoncé clutched Nara to her chest. The door shut with a metallic thud that echoed like the closing of a fate she wasn't sure she wanted, but couldn't refuse. Cold morning air seeped through the seams, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant rain. Hollowcreek faded behind them, its crooked roofs and muddy paths dissolving into a blur as the black-carved carriage carried her up the winding hill. Beyoncé exhaled slowly, her breath trembling. "This is real," she whispered to Nara, brushing a fingertip across the baby's cheek. "We're really going." But the child did not cry. She stared up at her mother with wide, luminous eyes, as if she already understood. The first hour of travel passed in silence except for the rhythmic clatter of hooves. Beyoncé sat stiffly on the velvety seat, afraid to touch anything. The interior was softer than any bed she'd ever slept on. Dark emerald cushions, gold filigree etched into the frame, heavy curtains tied with braided cords. This wasn't transport. It was wealth, unimaginable, unreachable wealth, disguised as a ride. A man in Draven black armor rode alongside the carriage on horseback. Beyoncé glimpsed him through the window, focused, still, never once glancing her way. His reverence was not for her. It was for the crest on the carriage. For the alpha who commanded it. Beyoncé swallowed hard. Every bump in the road reminded her she didn't belong here, wrapped in velvet and silence. She had dirt under her fingernails from digging through snow to find fallen sticks for firewood the day before. Her boots were cracked, her dress mended too many times to count. She didn't smell like luxury. She smelled like survival. Nara stirred. Beyoncé instinctively tightened her grip. "It's all right," she murmured. "Mama's here." As if in response, a faint shimmer pulsed beneath the baby's wrist. Beyoncé blinked, thinking it a trick of the moving light. Until the glow brightened, soft and violet, like the first flicker of dusk. Her heart stumbled. Not again. She had seen it once before. Just after Nara was born. A tiny pulse beneath her skin, like a heartbeat glowing through flesh. Beyoncé had convinced herself it was exhaustion. Light playing tricks. Fear rewriting memory. But this time, she was awake. Alert. Staring directly at it. And the light didn't vanish. It pulsed. Once. Twice. A slow, steady rhythm. Beyoncé's breath caught. "What are you, my little one?" she whispered, pressing her lips to Nara's temple. For the rest of the morning, the glow did not return. But Beyoncé could not forget it. The landscape began to shift as the carriage traveled north. Hollowcreek's sparse fields and bare trees gave way to towering evergreens and sweeping valleys. Winter clung stubbornly to the mountainsides, but sunlight fractured through snow-laden branches in dazzling shards. Beyoncé watched the scenery with awe that felt almost childish. She had never left her village, not truly. A few trips to nearby markets, but never beyond the borders carved by poverty. Here, the world felt impossibly wide. The air tasted cleaner. The wind whispered differently, less like menace, more like old secrets stirring in the treetops. A raven flew parallel to the carriage at one point, its feathers glinting blue-black. It cawed once, then soared ahead. The guard beside the carriage inclined his head respectfully. "Messenger of the keep," Beyoncé murmured, recalling old tales. She'd always dismissed them as dramatized stories to frighten children. But seeing it now, she wasn't so sure. Leaf shadows raced along the ground as the horses picked up speed. Beyoncé shifted Nara to her shoulder and allowed her mind to wander, to all the nights she had held her baby close, praying for a different life. One without hunger. One without fear. One where she didn't have to choose which days she could eat and which days she couldn't. She had always dreamed of a future for Nara. Hope was the only luxury she could afford. And now she was being taken to a fortress ruled by a man whose wealth could feed villages, whose power shaped trade routes and toppled rival packs, whose decisions echoed across the 5 kingdoms. Lord Draven. The more she tried to picture him, the more impossible he seemed. She imagined a monster, a tyrant, a shadow with a voice. The way the guards spoke his name, with both fear and reverence, chilled her. What kind of man summons a stranger and her infant over a misaddressed letter? What kind of man reads such a letter at all? She exhaled, her heart thudding. "I shouldn't be here." Every instinct screamed it. But Nara's breathing was soft, steady. Her small fingers curled around Beyoncé's thumb with a trust that broke her heart. "She deserves this chance," Beyoncé whispered into her daughter's hair. "Even if I'm terrified." By late afternoon, the world began to rise around them, hills folding into cliffs, cliffs into jagged mountains streaked with shadow. The road narrowed into a winding path carved between stone walls. The horses slowed. The guard finally spoke. "We are nearing the watch gate." His tone was reverent. Beyoncé angled forward to peer out the window. The trees parted, revealing an enormous archway built directly into the mountainside. Carved wolves tall as houses stood sentinel on either side. Their stone eyes gleamed with a burnished amber glow as the carriage approached. Torches ignited along the walls with a roaring hiss. Beyoncé jumped. Nara didn't. In fact, the child turned her head toward the crackling flame as though listening. A whisper drifted through the air, too faint, too fleeting. Beyoncé stiffened. "Did you hear that?" she asked the guard. He didn't look at her. Only the mountain wind. But Beyoncé wasn't convinced. The glowing wrist, the whispering wind, the torches lighting themselves. Nothing about this journey felt ordinary. The gates rumbled open. The horses moved forward. And then Beyoncé saw it. Blackmoor Keep. It emerged from the mountains like something half-built, half-born, its obsidian walls gleaming under the dying sunlight. Taller than any structure she'd ever imagined. Windows lit with a warm, golden glow. Towers spiraling upward like claws reaching toward the sky. It should have been terrifying. But somehow, it wasn't. Not entirely. Beyoncé felt a warmth as the carriage crossed the final bridge. A strange sense of being observed, maybe even welcomed, though she could not explain why. As they arrived at the courtyard, servants and guards lined the steps. They bowed, not to her, but to the carriage. A man stood at the highest point of the staircase, broad-shouldered, still as carved stone, long dark hair caught by the wind, clothing that bore the green and black colors of the Draven wolves. Alpha Lord Kale Draven. He was taller than she'd imagined. More imposing. More human somehow. Not a myth or a monster, but a man carved from power and shadows and something unreadable in the eyes. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the baby. And in his face, beneath the hardness, beneath the authority, was something that startled her more than any threat could have. Recognition. He began descending the steps slowly, each movement controlled. Beyoncé's pulse raced. She clutched Nara so tightly the child squirmed. One of the servants hurried to open the carriage door. "My lady," he said softly, "if you'll allow us." But Beyoncé didn't move. Not until Kale Draven reached the base of the staircase, standing only a few steps away, close enough she could feel his presence like a shift in the air. His voice was deep, roughened like stones smoothed by storm winds. "You made a request," he said. "And I answered." Beyoncé's mouth went dry. I didn't mean I wrote the wrong." "I know." His gaze flicked to Nara's tiny form. "And yet, the letter reached me all the same, as if fate itself had delivered it." Nara whimpered softly. The faint violet glow pulsed again beneath her wrist. Kale's eyes sharpened with a flash of something ancient. He stepped closer, not touching, merely observing, and the air thickened with tension Beyoncé couldn't understand. A small wind stirred around them despite the still courtyard. The torches lining the walls flickered. Somewhere deep in the mountain, a low rumble echoed, like the distant growl of a waking beast. Kale inhaled sharply. "So it's true," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "She carries the spark." Beyoncé's heart hammered. The spark. But Kale didn't answer. Not yet. He straightened, regaining the cold composure of an alpha before a pack. "You and your daughter will be cared for here," he said. "Federal protected. Whatever threat pursued her, it ends at these walls." "Threat?" Beyoncé repeated, her fear spiking. Kale's jaw tightened. "There are those who would harm her. Or use her. Or worse." His eyes drifted back to Nara, softer now. "I won't allow that." It was not kindness. Not exactly. It was a promise. A vow as old as the wolves etched into his keep. Servants stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Prepare chambers for the lady," Kale ordered. "And alert the healers. The child's readings need to be confirmed." Readings. Beyoncé's blood ran cold. Kale looked at her once more, really looked, his expression unreadable. "You did not come here by mistake," he said quietly. "Even if you believe it was one." He turned away, climbing the steps with that same controlled, predatory grace. Beyoncé watched him go, her breath trapped in her lungs. The wind whispered again, brushing her cheek like a warning. Or a welcome. She stepped out of the carriage, Nara held tight against her chest, and stared up at the towering keep. Her old life was fading behind her like the road to Hollowcreek. And whatever destiny awaited her here was unfolding fast, too fast. She felt the first tug of something ancient, something that tied her, Nara, and the Alpha together. A bond she did not understand. A fate she had not chosen. But she was already walking toward it. And there was no turning back. Beyoncé had barely taken 3 steps into the entry hall when she felt it. A presence behind her, powerful enough to shift the air itself. She turned slowly. Cale Draven stood at the top of the grand staircase, framed by arching stone pillars and the warm glow of torchlight. He looked different than he had in the courtyard, less like a distant ruler descending upon her, more like something ancient watching from above. His gaze swept over Beyoncé first, steady, assessing, unreadable. Then it landed on Nara, and the world seemed to still. Cale descended with slow, measured steps, each one echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Beyoncé tightened her grip around Nara, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. When he reached the last step, he stopped an arm's length away. Up close, Cale was even more overwhelming. Broad shoulders, carved features, eyes that held storms and shadows. A warrior's presence tempered only by the controlled patience of a ruler. But when he looked at the baby, something softened. Barely, but enough for Beyoncé to see. He wasn't merely studying Nara. He was recognizing her. Cale exhaled quietly, almost reverently. "Show me her wrist." Beyoncé hesitated, but Nara shifted, fussing softly, and Beyoncé loosened her hold. She unwrapped the shawl just enough for Cale to see the tiny pulse of light beneath the baby's skin. Violet. Soft. Alive. Cale's jaw tightened, not in fear, but in confirmation. "So it's true," he murmured. "Another Wolfline child." Beyoncé's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "You keep saying that, Wolfline." "Spark. Hunters." "You speak as if she's something out of legend." Cale's gaze lifted to hers, steady and unflinching. "She is." A chill crawled down her spine. Cale motioned for her to follow. "Come. We'll speak privately." She obeyed, though every instinct trembled between fear and an inexplicable sense of safety. Two guards pushed open a set of heavy wooden doors, revealing a chamber filled with warm lamplight, shelves of scrolls, and a vast map pinned with dark obsidian markers. Cale stood near the center. "Sit, if you wish," he said. "The child can stay in your arms." Beyoncé didn't sit. She wasn't ready. "Tell me what you think she is." Cale's eyes flicked to Nara, lingering with something like protectiveness. "There have been whispers for months. Infants across the kingdoms vanishing before their names are even recorded. Villages searched. Midwives questioned. And no bodies left behind." Her stomach twisted. Why would anyone take babies? Cale's gaze hardened. "Because some are born carrying dormant wolfline blood, an ancient lineage older than the kingdoms themselves. Their powers manifest unpredictably. But to the wrong hands, even a dormant spark is worth killing for, or exploiting." Beyoncé held Nara closer, instinctively shielding the tiny pulse, still glowing faintly beneath her wrist. "But she's just a baby," Beyoncé whispered. "She can't. She isn't." Cale stepped closer, his voice low. "You saw the glow. You heard the whispers in the wind on your journey. Your child is awakening." Beyoncé swallowed, her throat tight. "I don't understand. My family has no magic. We're farmers. Poor ones. I don't even know Nara's father. He left before she was born." At that, Cale's attention sharpened. "You never met him?" "No," her voice cracked. "I barely remember his name." Cale's expression was unreadable, but not unkind. He paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Wolfline children don't need parents with magic," he explained. "The blood chooses its vessel through ancestry long forgotten, sometimes buried hundreds of years deep." He stopped in front of her. "You were right to be afraid. You were right to seek help. Even if the letter was misdelivered." Heat rose in Beyoncé's cheeks. Mortification and confusion tangled inside her. "It was a mistake," she said softly. "I never meant for you to see it. Yet I did." Cale's voice dropped to something almost quiet. And it saved her. Before she could respond, a servant pushed open the door, carrying a tray of warm cloths and a small candle to light the room further. The flame flickered the moment he stepped inside. Nara whimpered. The flame sputtered, then flared upward, twice its size. The servant yelped, stumbling back. Beyoncé gasped and jerked Nara away from the light. Cale didn't flinch. He watched the candle with a knowing calm. Then he turned to Beyoncé. "That," he said softly, "is the first sign." "The first sign of what?" she whispered, voice shaking. Cale didn't answer immediately. He approached the servant, placing a steady hand on the trembling man's shoulder. His voice shifted, no longer cold alpha command, but a gentleness Beyoncé hadn't expected. She's not dangerous, Cale told the servant. Just sensitive. The bond is waking. The servant bowed, still pale, and hurried from the room. Beyoncé stared at Cale, stunned. You're calmer than I expected. I've spent months searching for children like her. His gaze softened. I won't fear the very thing I vowed to protect. Their eyes met, hers filled with uncertainty, his filled with something steadier. Older. A promise woven into silence. Her fear didn't vanish, but it changed shape. Into something cautious, fragile, almost trusting. Cale stepped closer again. You and Nara are safe here, he said. No harm will touch her inside these walls. The words struck deep, heavier than any vow she'd ever been given. Beyoncé felt the tremble in her chest ease, if only slightly. And what about outside these walls, she asked. You said there are hunters. Cale's jaw tensed. There are. And they may already know of her existence. Ice pooled in her stomach. But, he continued, they will not take her. Not while I live. Not while this keep stands. The certainty in his voice didn't feel like bravado. It felt like truth. Beyoncé looked down at Nara, her small face resting peacefully against Beyoncé's arm, unaware of the danger stalking her shadow. When Beyoncé looked up again, Cale was watching her. Not with calculation. Not with pity. But with a strange, quiet recognition, as though something in him understood her fear, her strength, her desperation more intimately than any stranger should. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Cale turned away, his cloak shifting like a shadow. There is much to explain, he said. But for tonight, you both must rest. Tomorrow, I will show you why you were brought here. And what destiny has already begun weaving around your child. Destiny. The word echoed through Beyoncé's mind as a servant reappeared to escort her to her chambers. As she followed, holding Nara close, she glanced back one last time. Cale still stood there in the lamplight, broad, imposing, unreadable, but with a softness she hadn't noticed until now. An alpha feared by kings. A man who looked at her child as though he'd been waiting for her his entire life. And Beyoncé felt it again. That subtle pull. That invisible thread. That first whisper of a bond awakening. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew one thing. Her life, and Nara's, was no longer her own. Morning light spilled through the stone arches of Blackmoor Keep like a gentle blessing, golden, warm, and startlingly alive for a fortress built by warriors. Beyoncé held Nara close as she stepped into the corridor, blinking at the brightness. She half expected the keep to feel cold, harsh, or suffocating. Instead, it breathed. Servants moved quietly through the halls, bowing respectfully when they passed her. The air carried the scent of fresh bread, burning cedar, and something faintly metallic, magic, though she didn't know how she knew that. A woman approached, dressed in a simple blue gown and wearing a braided cord at her waist. Lady Beyoncé, she said with a warm bow. I am Mara. The Alpha instructed me to show you the keep today. Lady? Beyoncé nearly choked. Oh no, I'm not. The Alpha's orders, Mara replied with a soft smile. We don't question them. Beyoncé fell silent. She didn't dare question them either. Mara guided her down a long hallway lit by floating orbs of amber light. Beyoncé stared, wide-eyed. They're spell lamps, Mara explained. Enchanted by the keep's founders. They brighten or dim according to who walks beneath them. Beyoncé noticed they glowed a little brighter when she passed. But when Nara stirred, they flared. Mara's steps faltered for a heartbeat. You see? The keep recognizes her. Beyoncé hugged Nara protectively, unsure whether to feel comforted or alarmed. They reached a balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. Soldiers trained below, but not with ordinary weapons. Some wielded silver-edged staffs that sparked with bursts of blue light. Others practiced shield formations glowing with runic sigils. This place, Beyoncé whispered. What is it really? Mara folded her hands. Blackmoor Keep is more than a home for the Alpha. It is a sanctuary. The last stronghold for wolfline magic. Beyoncé's breath caught. So Kale, he's protecting children like Nara? Mara nodded, her expression shadowing. Many have gone missing. Villages wake to empty cradles. Some never find a trace. Some find ashes. Beyoncé's stomach turned. Nara was never supposed to reach these walls, Mara continued quietly. If she hadn't been brought here, if the Alpha hadn't intervened. She let the sentence fade. Beyoncé didn't want to hear the end. They continued the tour, through libraries filled with ancient scrolls, through chambers lined with enchanted relics that hummed when Nara was carried past them. Beyoncé couldn't stop noticing how the walls themselves seemed to shift subtly, as if watching them. By midday, Mara led them to a quieter wing of the keep. This is where the Alpha spends most of his time, she said, stopping before a large oak door carved with a wolf's crest. Before Beyoncé could ask anything, the door opened. Kale stood inside, his broad frame illuminated by the glow of suspended runes drifting above an open table. His eyes lifted immediately, not to Beyoncé, but to Nara. The runes flickered when he looked at her. Almost bowing, Mara quietly excused herself. Beyoncé stepped inside slowly. The room smelled of old parchment and protective magic, the kind that made the hairs rise on her arms. Kale's attention returned to her. You slept well. Not a greeting. Not a command. A genuine question. She nodded. Yes, thank you. Kale motioned her closer. There is something I want you to see. He swept his hand over the table. The runes brightened, revealing a map of the kingdom, mountains, forests, rivers, all marked with glowing points. These are the places where wolfline children were taken, Kale said. His voice remained calm, but Beyoncé felt the anger simmering beneath it. She pointed to the brightest mark. What about that one? Kale's jaw tightened. That is where Nara was born. The room went still. Her legs weakened. She clutched Nara instinctively. You knew where we lived? I knew a child was taken from that region, he said. I didn't know she survived, or was hidden in plain sight. The guilt in his eyes surprised her, as though he believed he should have found Nara sooner. Before she could speak, a sudden chill swept through the room. A shadow slid across the wall, wrong, too tall, too thin. Beyoncé gasped and stepped back, shielding Nara with her body. Kale moved instantly. He crossed the room in one step, placing himself between them. The air around him thickened, trembling with power. His eyes darkened, wolf-dark. Show yourself, he growled. The shadow recoiled as if burned. Then it darted upward and vanished through a crack of darkness near the ceiling. Kale cursed under his breath. Spies, he muttered. Searching for her already. Beyoncé swallowed hard. Was it human? No, Kale said. And not alive. She clutched Nara even tighter. Why are they after her? Kale turned slowly, meeting her gaze. Because a child with dormant wolfline magic can reshape the future of our people. His voice softened. And because she is more powerful than you realize. Almost on cue, Nara stirred, and the runes above the table pulsed gently in response. Beyoncé froze. Kale watched with an expression she couldn't decipher, some mix of reverence and inevitability. She reacts to you, Beyoncé whispered. She reacts to the bond, Kale corrected softly. Between wolfline magic and its chosen alpha. Beyoncé's pulse stumbled. Chosen, by who? By fate, Kale said. By whatever ancient force guides these lineages. I do not pretend to understand it completely. But I know this. He stepped closer, his presence warm and grounding rather than intimidating. When she looks at me, her spark settles. She feels safety instinctively. Wolfline children sense their protectors before they can even speak. Beyoncé glanced down at Nara, who was now staring directly at Kale, tiny fingers outstretched toward him. Something in Beyoncé softened. Unwilling. Unexpected. Kale reached out slowly. May I? She hesitated only a breath before nodding. He touched Nara's hand. A faint pulse of violet light glimmered briefly where their skin met. Nara giggled. Beyoncé's heart clenched. Something ancient was moving between them, between all three of them. And though she didn't understand it, she could feel it rising like a tide. Kale stepped back reluctantly, clearing his throat. "You are safe here," he said again, but this time it wasn't a command or even reassurance. It was a vow. Beyoncé felt the truth of it in her bones. When Nara returned to escort her back to her chambers, Beyoncé glanced over her shoulder. Kale still stood watching her. Not as a king examining a peasant, but as a protector bound to something he could no longer ignore. And Beyoncé felt it again. That quiet pull, that whisper of a bond forming in the spaces between them. Danger surrounded them. Magic stirred beneath the keep stones. Enemies watched through cracks in reality itself. But for the first time since Nara's birth, Beyoncé did not feel alone. If you'd like, I can begin Chapter 5, The Moonlit Trial next, with building tension, magic awakening, and the first true threat against Nara. Night settled heavily over Blackmoor Keep, thick with fog and the low hum of magic. Beyoncé lay awake in the guest chamber, staring at the ceiling beams. Nara slept curled against her chest, warm and soft, but restless. Every few breaths, the baby twitched as if responding to something Beyoncé couldn't see. A whisper of wind brushed the window. Then Nara's wrist glowed. Softly at first, like moonlight warming beneath her skin. Beyoncé froze, breath trapped in her throat. The glow brightened, pulsing with a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, but not quite. Something older. Wilder. "Nara," she whispered. The baby opened her eyes. They shimmered faintly violet. And Beyoncé heard it. Not a cry. Not a sound. A thought. "Mama." Barely a whisper inside her mind, fragile as dew and just as fleeting. But Beyoncé lurched upright, heart hammering. Oh gods, oh gods. The glow faded as quickly as it came. Nara blinked sleepily and nestled back into her mother's arms, unaware she had just crossed into something extraordinary. Moments later, a knock echoed at the door, firm but controlled. Beyoncé hesitated before opening it. Kale stood outside, cloak thrown over simple tunic and trousers, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd come from some midnight patrol. But it was the expression on his face, alert, sensing something, that struck her. "You felt it too," he said quietly. Beyoncé swallowed. Her wrist, it glowed. "And I think I heard." "Thoughts?" Kale finished. "Faint impressions." Wolfline children experience early telepathic sparks when their magic stirs. She held Nara tighter. "Is she in danger?" Kale stepped into the room without waiting for permission, but his presence did not feel intrusive. Instead, it felt anchoring. "The fact she awakened tonight means others may have sensed it," he said. "Hunters. Rival alphas. Anyone attuned to wolfline power." Fear clawed Beyoncé's chest, but she forced herself to stay still. "Then what do we do?" Kale's gaze lifted to her, something fierce and protective simmering behind it. "We protect her. Together." The word together should not have comforted her as much as it did. Kale moved closer, examining Nara gently. The baby blinked up at him, and her wrist gave the faintest pulse of light again. Kale inhaled sharply, almost reverently. "She recognizes you," Beyoncé whispered. "She recognizes the bond," Kale corrected, voice low. "And so do I." Before Beyoncé could ask what that meant, exhaustion swept over her like a wave. The moment she blinked, her vision blurred and the world shifted. She stood in a forest made of silver light. The trees glowed from within, branches whispering secrets in ancient tongues. A river cut through the woods, its surface reflecting stars that had no place in any real sky. Beyoncé clutched Nara to her chest. But when she looked up, Kale stood before them. Not as a man. Not entirely. His silhouette shimmered with wolf light, a ghostly aura outlining a great beast behind him, massive, regal, eyes burning the same violet as Nara's glow. "What is happening?" she whispered. Kale spoke without moving his lips. "This is the bond's memory." The forest pulsed, alive with something sacred. Images rose around them. Wolfline infants from centuries past, alphas bowing in protection, bloodlines intertwining, magic threading through generations like golden thread. One vision lingered. A child glowing like Nara, carried by a woman who looked eerily like Beyoncé, and protected by an alpha standing exactly where Kale did now. "You three are not the first," the forest whispered. "And you will not be the last." The dream cracked. Beyoncé jerked awake with a gasp. She was on the floor, Kale crouched beside her, hand braced at her back. "You collapsed," he said. "Did you see something?" She nodded, breath shaking. "A forest of silver. You were there. And Nara. And something was binding us, something ancient." Kale's expression darkened, but not with fear. Recognition. Acceptance. And something else, something he did not yet name. "The bond is real," he said softly. "And it is awakening faster than I expected." "What does it want?" Beyoncé whispered. Kale didn't answer immediately. Then, "To survive." Nara stirred as if agreeing. A sudden crash split the air. Metal clashed somewhere down the hallway, followed by shouts. Kale reacted instantly, scooping Nara into Beyoncé's arms. "Stay behind me." They stepped into the corridor just as a figure darted from the shadows, a hooded intruder, too fast, too silent. Kale shifted, power crackling off him. But before he could strike, a guard lunged from the side, tackling the intruder to the ground. More guards swarmed, dragging the struggling figure away. The corridor filled with torches, blades, and snarled orders. Kale's eyes burned with fury. "They're testing our defenses," he growled. "Trying to find weaknesses." Beyoncé's knees trembled, but she did not fall. She clutched Nara close, jaw tightening. "What would they have done if they reached her?" she asked, voice barely steady. Kale didn't soften the truth. "Taken her. Killed you." Beyoncé closed her eyes briefly. But when she opened them, something inside her had hardened. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me how to protect my child." Kale looked at her, truly looked, seeing not a poor village woman, but a mother forged by desperation and love. "You're stronger than you know," he murmured. "And she's depending on me." Kale stepped closer, voice dropping. "She depends on us." The word "us" again. And Beyoncé didn't flinch this time. He lifted a hand slowly, as if giving her every chance to refuse, and brushed a lock of her hair back behind her ear. It was nothing, a tiny gesture, but it carried the weight of a vow neither of them had spoken aloud. "Rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we prepare." She nodded. And as Kale escorted her back to the chamber, guards flanking them on all sides, Beyoncé realized something had changed. She was no longer a frightened mother dragged into a world she didn't understand. She was becoming part of it. Part of the bond. Part of the prophecy. Part of whatever destiny waited for her, Nara, and the Alpha whose shadow now walked beside theirs. The next morning dawned gray and cold, Blackmoor Keep wrapped in a mist that clung to the stone like breath held too long. Beyoncé stood in the training courtyard with Nara strapped against her chest, the baby bundled in soft furs that Kale himself had ordered for her. But the softness ended there. The moment Beyoncé stepped onto the frost-rimmed stones, the air changed. Guards paused mid-drill. Trainers glanced her way with unreadable expressions. And Kale, standing at the far edge of the yard, watched her with a gaze carved from iron. "This isn't a test of strength," he said as she approached. "It's a test of instinct." "Instinct?" she asked, rubbing Nara's back to keep her warm. "To protect her," Kale replied. "Not with claws. Not with weapons. With awareness. Wit. Resolve." Beyoncé straightened, shoulders firming. "I'm ready." Kale nodded once. "Then it begins now." The exercise started quietly enough. Kale's guards created a large perimeter around the courtyard. Beyoncé was instructed to walk its length while carrying Nara, reacting to any threat she sensed. At first, it felt like a strange chore, just walking in circles, listening to her heartbeat echo in her ears. But then she felt it. A shadow behind her. A shift in the air. A wrong footstep. She spun just in time to see a guard lunging, blunt training blade raised. Beyoncé dropped low, turning her body so Nara was shielded, and rolled across the frost-coated ground. Her breath left her in a gasp, but she didn't drop her daughter. Kale's voice rang across the courtyard. "Good." Another guard attacked from the left, fast, too fast. Beyoncé swayed, dodging by inches. She stumbled, but caught herself on one knee, keeping Nara tucked safely against her. A third guard appeared from behind the pillars. Then a fourth. Beyoncé's pulse thundered, but fear didn't swamp her this time. It sharpened her. Every instinct focused on Nara, how her baby's breaths quickened, how her tiny fingers curled tighter into Beyoncé's tunic, how a warm vibration pulsed from her daughter's skin. Enough, Kale ordered after the last guard advanced. The men halted instantly. Beyoncé collapsed onto her hands, panting hard. But Nara was safe, still nestled against her unharmed. Kale approached slowly, each step measured, as if fighting the urge to run to her. "You lasted longer than most trained guards," he said, voice low with something that sounded suspiciously like awe. Her cheeks flushed. "I wasn't thinking. I just reacted." "That's what protection is," he murmured. Their eyes held for a moment too long, heat and surprise, and something deeper flickering between them, before Beyoncé tore her gaze away. She wasn't ready to understand what that meant. The trial wasn't over. Kale led her into a silent chamber within the keep. Its walls were lined with wolf-carved pillars, and a circular symbol glowed faintly in the stone floor. "Step inside," Kale instructed. "This test is different." Beyoncé hesitated. "Will it hurt her?" "No," he nodded toward Nara. "If anything, she may awaken." The word awakened a cold flutter in Beyoncé's stomach. But she stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air thickened. Heavy, humming with magic. The circle reacted to Nara first. A soft violet light radiated from her wrist, glowing brighter and brighter until Beyoncé's vision blurred. "Mama," Nara whispered, not aloud, but inside Beyoncé's mind as clearly as if she had spoken. "I'm here," Beyoncé whispered back. The chamber pulsed. Images flickered, flashes of wolf-lined blood, ancient forests, battles fought in moonlight. Beyoncé staggered. Her knees buckled. Kale lunged forward, grabbing her arms before she could fall. His touch steadied her instantly. "Easy," he murmured. "You're stepping into her magic." "I'm not strong enough." But Kale shook his head, tightening his grip. "You're stronger than you've been told your entire life." The magic surged again, sharper this time. A threat. A warning. A presence watching them from beyond the walls. Kale stiffened, sniffing the air. "They're close." "Who?" Beyoncé asked. "Rogue hunters. They've been circling the mountain for days." Before she could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A guard stumbled inside, bleeding from his shoulder. "My lord, rogues at the northern gate." Kale didn't hesitate. "Secure the keep. Double the perimeter." The guard ran. Kale turned to Beyoncé. "Stay behind me. Do not leave this room." But Beyoncé shook her head, something fierce rising inside her. "If they're after my child, I'm not hiding." For a heartbeat, Kale looked as if he wanted to argue. Then slowly he nodded. "Then stay close." They reached the northern gate just as a dark-cloaked figure leapt over the outer wall. The intruder moved with inhuman speed, eyes glowing feral red. A hunter, and not an ordinary one. He lunged straight toward Beyoncé. Time slowed. Beyoncé froze until Nara suddenly cried out, a soft but powerful wail that vibrated through the air like a shockwave. A burst of violet energy exploded from the baby's wrist. The hunter was thrown backward, slamming into a stone column hard enough to crack it. Silence fell. Even Kale stared, stunned. Nara hiccuped once, then giggled, as if she hadn't just unleashed ancient magic. Beyoncé held her trembling. "Baby, what did you just do?" Kale exhaled, voice low and reverent. "Her first shield. A wolf-line child's most sacred instinct. And she did it to protect me," Beyoncé whispered, off-flooding her. Kale stepped closer, eyes locked on Beyoncé with a heat that made her breath catch. "She's not the only one," he said quietly. "You protected her with everything you had today. And she responded to you." Their faces were inches apart. Not touching. Not crossing that line. But the space between them felt charged, magnetic, alive with something neither of them dared name. By evening, the hunters were driven off, the keep secured. Beyoncé sat by the fire in her chamber, Nara sleeping peacefully against her. Kale entered without his usual armor of command. His shoulders were relaxed, his voice low, softer, held warmth she hadn't heard before. "You did well today," he said. "So did she. And you both surprised me," he admitted. They stood there in a quiet, fragile moment, firelight flickering against stone, Nara breathing softly between them. "Kale," Beyoncé whispered, "what happens now?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation, she saw everything he was holding back: fear for them, desire to protect, and a bond deepening faster than either intended. "Now," he said finally, "now the real danger begins." But when he looked at her again, something gentler flickered beneath his sternness. "And we face it together." The storm arrived just after midnight. Not a storm of rain or wind, this one howled with claws and breath and hunger. Beyoncé woke suddenly, Nara stirring in her bassinet before the baby even made a sound. A chill crept up Beyoncé's spine, colder than the winter settling over Blackmoor's mountain. Something was wrong. Then she heard it. A distant roar. A haunting, bone-deep rumble that shook the chamber walls. Beyoncé froze, breath caught in her throat. Nara whimpered, tiny fingers glowing faint lavender in the dark. Beyoncé scooped her up instantly. The glow wasn't normal. Not for any child. Not unless... "Oh gods," Beyoncé whispered. "It's happening." A pounding struck her door a heartbeat later. "Lady Beyoncé." It was one of Kale's guards, Jorek, the scarred one she met in the courtyard. "The keep is under attack. The Alpha sent me for you." The floor vibrated beneath them as another roar tore through the night, closer this time, feral and enraged. Nara's glow intensified. Beyoncé held her tightly. "What is that?" she demanded, stepping toward the door. "Rogues," Jorek said, breath ragged. "More than we've ever seen. They knew. They came for the child." Beyoncé's blood ran cold. "How?" she whispered. Jorek didn't answer. He didn't need to. Danger had been circling them for days. Tonight it struck. "Where is Kale?" she asked. Jorek swallowed hard. "Holding the northern gate. But he won't hold it for long." Beyoncé's heart squeezed. Kale was out there fighting alone, fighting for them. "Take me to him," she said. Jorek blinked. "My lady, it's too dangerous." "Your place is..." "My place," Beyoncé snapped, stepping forward with Nara in her arms, "is wherever she is safest." "And that is with Kale." The guard hesitated, reading the fire in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Then stay close." The corridors of Blackmoor Keep shook with the feral sounds of battle, snarls, the crash of stone, the clash of steel. Guttural howls echoed from the outer walls, and the air grew thick with the scent of magic and blood. Servants hurried past with terrified expressions. Guards sprinted toward the gates. Beyoncé held Nara tighter, tucking the baby beneath her cloak. As they rounded a corner, Beyoncé froze. A rogue wolf stood at the far end of the hall. Massive, black-furred, eyes glowing red like burning coals. Its growl reverberated through the stone. Jorek pushed Beyoncé behind him. "Run." But Beyoncé didn't move. Her legs wouldn't obey. The wolf lunged. Nara cried out, a sound so small, but filled with something ancient. A burst of violet light erupted from her wrist again, brighter than before, no mere pulse this time. It blasted down the hall like a wave of moonlit fire. The wolf was thrown backward, skidding across the floor and smashing into the far wall. It didn't rise. Jorek stared at the baby with wide, horrified eyes. "Moon preserve us," he whispered. She's the one from the old prophecy." Beyoncé didn't understand, but she didn't have time to ask. "Move," she shouted, grabbing his arm. They ran. The northern gate was chaos. Beyoncé skidded to a halt as she stepped out onto the battlements. Snow swirled through the night air, mixing with ash and sparks. Wolves, some in human form, some shifted, clashed with Kale's soldiers. The stone floor was cracked from the force of magic and claws. And at the center of it all, Kale. Towering. Ferocious. Half-shifted, eyes wolf gold, fangs gleaming, muscles taut as he fought 3 rogues at once. Beyoncé's breath caught. She had never seen anything like him. not even in legends. He moved like a storm. Every strike precise, every step a warning to the world that nothing would reach the keep while he still breathed. But even he was being pushed back. More rogues poured in from the shadows. They were coordinated, trained, desperate, and they were hunting Nara. Kale slashed through one wolf, sending it tumbling off the battlement, and turned just as Beyoncé and Jorek arrived. His eyes snapped to her. To Nara. Something in him surged. Behind me, he roared, sprinting toward them. But before he reached them, a rogue alpha appeared behind him, larger than the others, his aura pulsing with twisted magic. He lunged for Kale with killing intent. No! Beyoncé screamed. Nara let out a wail that seemed to shake the sky. A second burst of violet energy erupted, but this time it didn't push outward. It expanded, forming a shimmering sphere around Beyoncé and Nara. The air crackled with ancient power. Kale felt it immediately. He stumbled mid-fight, eyes widening as he sensed the bond snapping into place. No, he whispered. It can't be. But it was. The ancient bond spoken of in his ancestor scrolls, the triad connection between alpha, mother, and child destined to reshape the wolf lines. It was awakening. The rogue alpha sensed it too. His gaze turned feral with greed. The child, he snarled. She is the one foretold. He lunged toward Beyoncé. Kale roared, a sound so primal it shook snow from the battlements. He threw himself between Beyoncé and the rogue alpha, claws tearing into the enemy's shoulder. The rogue retaliated, slashing Kale across the ribs. Kale staggered. No, Beyoncé cried. She didn't think she moved. With Nara in her arms, she stepped forward, placing herself beside Kale instead of behind him. The rogue snarled. Move, human. You are nothing. Maybe, Beyoncé whispered. But I am her mother. And something inside her love, fear, instinct ignited. Nara's glow answered her. The sphere around them pulsed violently, expanding outward. The rogue alpha howled as the light struck him. The magic burned away the darkness crawling beneath his skin. Kale seized the opening, shifting fully, dark fur bursting over his body, claws lengthening, and tackled the rogue alpha. They clashed in a vortex of teeth and fury. Beyoncé shielded Nara with her body as the battle raged. Then one final roar. Silence. Kale stood over the rogue alpha's fallen form, blood dripping from his claws, his chest heaving. Slowly, his shift receded, his wolf settling back into human form. His eyes found Beyoncé, and everything else disappeared. He crossed the space between them like a man pulled by fate. Are you hurt? He demanded, voice rough, hands hovering as if afraid to touch her. No, she whispered. We're okay. His gaze shifted to Nara, still glowing faintly. That light, he murmured. It responded to you. Beyoncé swallowed. I felt her. Not her cries. Her thoughts. Her fear. Her strength. Kale cupped Beyoncé's cheek gently, reverently. That's the bond. The ancient one. The child, the mother, and the destined alpha. A triad stronger than any bloodline. She trembled beneath his touch. Kale, what does it mean? He exhaled, a sound that held centuries of weight. It means you were never here by accident. The words sank into her like sunlight. The alarms faded as the last of the rogues were subdued. Guards secured the gates. The storm of battle quieted. But something new stirred in the air, soft, warm, undeniable. Kale didn't step back. He stood close enough that Beyoncé could feel the heat of him, the rhythm of his breath, the raw emotion in his eyes. I thought I was protecting her, he said. But tonight I realized something. What? You protect her. You grounded her power. You steadied me. You held the bond in place without even knowing it. Beyoncé swallowed hard. I'm just a mother trying to keep her child safe. Kale's voice lowered. You're more than that. You always were. There, beneath the moonlight, was the moment she knew the world had shifted. The keep was safe. Nara was safe. The destiny she had tried to outrun had wrapped itself around her gently, firmly, unbreakably. Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing Nara's soft hair before resting lightly against Beyoncé's arm. His touch wasn't a command. It wasn't a claim. It was a promise. Whatever comes next, he said softly, we face it together. Beyoncé held his gaze, feeling warmth bloom in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the man before her. Something unspoken passed between them. Not a declaration. Not yet. But a question. A future. A spark. Nara stirred, opening her eyes, soft violet light glowing faintly as she looked between them. Kale smiled, a rare, breathtaking expression that softened his entire face. She recognizes us, he murmured. All three parts of the bond. Beyoncé drew in a shaky breath. So this is destiny? No, Kale said gently. Destiny brought you here. What happens next is our choice. For the first time since she had stepped into Blackmoor Keep, Beyoncé didn't feel like she was falling into someone else's story. She felt like she was beginning her own. Kale extended his hand, not as alpha, not as lord, but as man offering trust. Beyoncé placed her hand in his. Not because she was bound. Not because she was destined. But because she wanted to. The storm had passed. The keep stood strong. And in the quiet aftermath, as moonlight spilled across the battlements, the future opened before them, uncertain, powerful, intertwined. A mother. A child. An alpha. A bond sealed not by prophecy alone, but by choice. And it was only the beginning.